Good morning. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors to order on Tuesday, April 20th at 9 a.m. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Okay, so we have 20 present, 1 absent. First item, review and revise and or reaffirm the rules of order and duties of committees. Proposed changes to the rules of order. Grant, you want to lead us through this?
Yes. Bear with me for a second. Page 2's on the back of the agenda, my fault. I lost it. Okay. Good morning, everybody. These proposed changes have arisen over time as people at various committee and board meetings raise ideas. Jill and I, or Lori, or Ken, or Dave jot them down. And what is before you on page 2 of the agenda packet are the proposed changes to the rules of order. Starting with the first is Rule of Order 5, if you want me to go through them briefly. We've added, and you'll see there's sort of a theme, that agenda items must be germane to and fall within the county statutory authority, responsibility, and roles. And that was added because, as I said, in other areas that we've changed, we've added similar language. Moving on to Rule of Order number 8. Likewise, correspondence included with the agenda packet is limited to matters that are germane to an agenda item and fall within the county statutory authority, responsibilities, and roles. Also, we've put in time constraints is if a correspondence pertains to an item on the agenda, it must be in the possession of the administrator before noon on the 6th day prior to the scheduled board session to be included with the agenda packet. Additional correspondence will be accepted up until noon the day prior to the meeting, and a copy will be provided to all supervisors. However, it will not be included in the agenda packet. And that's just to recognize the reality that we try to get the agenda and the agenda packet out a week in advance. And we don't necessarily want to go in and be amending the agenda packet within that 5 or 6 days out from a particular meeting. Rule of Order 13, the existing language, what is being proposed is to be redacted and the language that's in blue be inserted. And it's just to formalize the consent to speak and participating in debate process that I think we've probably mostly always followed. But first would be that a member must be recognized by the chairperson before speaking, introducing a resolution or ordinance, making a motion, or debating a question. No member may speak more than twice or longer than 3 minutes the first time and 2 minutes the second time on the same motion. So that is in total 5 minutes. No member is entitled to be called on to speak a second time in debate on the same motion until everyone who is seeking recognition has had their first opportunity to speak. And again, discussions must be limited to the merits of the specific motion that is being debated, not the general subject. And that's just a recitation of Robert's rules. Rule of Order 15, we kept the first 2 paragraphs and added the language in blue on a motion to amend. Again, you'll see the language about must be germane, and we further clarified that here as being closely related to or having a bearing on the subject of the thing to be amended. Basically, what we're trying to avoid here, and it's stated in the rule, is that this means that no new subject can be introduced under the pretext of being an amendment. Two, motions to amend that create a fiscal impact, which is defined as an unbudgeted expense per section 65.90 with stats, will need to be postponed to the next succeeding meeting, or if the item is timely, and I should say timely is wrong, it should be time sensitive. It would require a 2/3 vote to pass at the same meeting if the fiscal impact can be properly determined, and that the finance director or administrator is to determine whether a proposed amendment has a fiscal impact, and if so, the estimated amount. If an amendment results in substantive change, consideration of the matter may be postponed until later in the same meeting or the next succeeding meeting. And if adopted, the administrator or finance director is to report back at the next succeeding meeting as to any unplanned allocation or consumption of internal human and other resources that results from the particular amendment. Finally, Rule of Order 27, public addressing the board. You'll see that similar language is that public comment is limited to matters that are germane to an agenda item and fall within the county's statutory authority, responsibilities, and rules.
Somebody care to make a motion so we can discuss? Got it.
I'll second it.
Okay, we're gonna use our pads, or are we gonna?
We're using, don't forget, we're using the pads. Okay, okay. Megan?
Thanks. I have one question in regards to the first point. Agenda items must be germane to and fall within the county's statutory authority, responsibilities, and roles. I feel like this obviously makes sense. However, I can think of a handful of times in the last 5 years that I've been on the board where there's been argument on the county board floor as to whether or not something we are discussing is within our responsibility and roles. And I'm wondering, like, who's going to be making that call? Like, how is that call made? Or how is that argument brought forward? Because I could see how a supervisor may want something added to the agenda for discussion, and there may be question as to whether it does fall within our responsibility and roles as a county board. So I'm curious about that.
Okay, thank you.
Ultimately, maybe in the situation you described, if a supervisor wanted something added to the agenda, the chairperson said no. Ultimately, the body, whether it's the county board or a committee, can override the chairperson, and the member who wanted the item added to the agenda can bring it up during the course of the meeting and request that it be added at the next meeting. And if the body, whether it's a committee or board, agrees, then it would be on the agenda for the next meeting. What we hope is that in most of these cases, or what I hope, is that the chairperson, the person wanting an item added to the agenda, can agree whether or not something meets this criteria.
Oh, definitely. That would be my hope as well.
Yeah.
But I feel like that conversation has happened on this floor before. So
Which is partly why this was brought up. But the other thing is, the vast majority of agenda items come through committees. I think what you're referring to is if an individual supervisor asks for an agenda item, and then I usually discuss that with Ken or Grant, and then move forward, either way. But as Grant said, any individual supervisor could bring it to the floor to be asked that I be overridden on what my decision was to add or not add, and then be added at the following meeting.
okay, thank you.
Vinnie?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One was answered with the agenda and the germane. I also have a question going down this to the second one. As far as materials going in the packets ahead of time, I'm wondering if we can, at a future date, come up with a way we can inform the public about this in a way that's more present on our website. And I think this comes to be because as an agenda item comes out, people want to respond. But what we're setting up here is that the only response they can do after an agenda item comes out is as it's stated here. It can't be in a packet because you can't respond to an agenda item if it's come out at the same time the deadline is for responding. So I'm trying to understand how we can better set that up and communicate that to the public. That's the first question. Thank you.
If I could just clarify on that too, that's one thing that we discussed at admin. And again, what we're trying to do is just make sure what we would actually include in the packet in terms of what would be the amended packet. But there is the ability for individuals still to submit up to noon the day before the meeting. And what we'll do is we'll take all of those comments and we'll print those, or we'll get those all in a form and we'll send it out to the full county board so they have that as their communication. So that still allows them to get that in terms of comments. So, and the only reason why we're just trying to get to a certain point of a cutoff is we just want to make sure that that time frame at least gives us the time to compile all those comments and then get those out. So I guess we're trying to find that balance and making sure that people can still submit comments in, but then that way we can also get those out to the county board for their review.
Thank you. The next question that I have is, when it comes to motions to amend, again, it's similar to the question that Megan asked about germane. How or who is going to determine if an amendment to a motion to amend fits within the germane of a topic, as that would happen on the floor in the moment, is the first part of the question. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different dynamic when something's on the floor, but if somebody made a motion to amend and somebody made a second during the course of the discussion, somebody who thought that the motion was not germane could raise that issue, and ultimately it would be decided by a majority of the body. Ultimately, a county board chairperson, or if it happened in a committee or another board, can, to some degree, say something that it is out of order in terms of it being not germane. But again, the body can override the decision of the chairperson at that point. But I would envision it happening during the course of discussion when a motion to amend is made and seconded and started to be discussed, and the body could agree whether or not something was germane.
Thank you, which gets to the second part of this question, which is a new subject. And if we can answer this at a later date, I don't expect all the answers now if we don't have them, but how do we determine something is related or unrelated to a topic? Sometimes that's obvious, but many amendments, it's not. It's a matter of opinion, whether it's related as a new subject.
Again, the same mechanism would be used as discussed for whether something's germane. Somebody could raise that as an objection. The body would get to decide. As you point out, I would think that most of the time it's going to be fairly obvious if there's a motion or resolution on the floor to buy squad cars and you insert something to do with changing a zoning district. That's obviously out of bounds. But for things that are a little bit more subtle and less clear, it would be discussed on the board floor, and ultimately the majority of the members would make a decision as to whether or not it was a change, something that was permissible.
So just with that in mind, does that mean that a motion to amend cannot be made if it's felt that it's not germane or it's a new subject, and that would be determined before or after the motion was made? I'm trying to figure out how we continue to make motions to amend if we don't have these two criteria ahead of time. Or that's why I don't want to, I won't be voting yes for this for that reason, because that process becomes very unclear to me how it's written here.
Well, the motion to amend has to be made first before any issue arises as to whether the subject of the motion is either germane or is something that's determined to be a new subject. So that would be the first step. There would have to be a motion to amend, and there would actually have to be a second before it could be discussed. And then during the course of discussion, the issue of whether or not it was germane or whether it constituted a new subject could be debated and decided by the body.
Thank you. The last part of the question, thank you for the patience, is that the financial impact, this is under motions to amend. Is the financial criteria impact going to be in place for all resolutions brought forward to the board, even if they're not an amendment? Because I'm trying to understand how that would be fair if it's not.
So in all of our resolutions already, we actually do already include the fiscal impact. That's that box off to the left. So those are all brought forward. So the question would be is that if an amendment's made and there's impact on that part of that section of the disclaimer of terms of what the fiscal impact is, that's what triggers that.
Thank you.
Kara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am opposed and would like to challenge the 3 minutes of speaking time. I feel like it's an arbitrary and limiting number, and I'm wondering why we're so scared about people talking. Last meeting, I spoke on the racism as a public health crisis for a little over 4 minutes, but I only spoke one time. And I already feel like it seems that 3 minutes just is not accessible for someone who maybe needs to think about her words. You know, it seems like it's not, it's such an arbitrary number, that 3 minutes. And I worry about the bias in implementing this rule as well. So I just wanted to bring those things forward and also state that last meeting was only like 2.5 hours, I think, and we make $150 a meeting. And I'm just wondering why we're so scared of discussion or spending a little time on this subject. Thank you.
You know, the 5 minutes in total, 3 minutes first time, 2 minutes second time, was a number that we arrived at during the course of discussion. When you look at it per each item on the agenda, that with 21 supervisors, that could be up to 100 minutes or more than an hour and a half of discussion on each item. It's not cast in stone. This is what we are proposing that we've come up with. But what we find generally, if there aren't limits set, then it makes it a little bit more difficult to control the course of the discussion or a meeting. So again, the 3 and 2 aren't set in stone, but I think it's safe to say it was the best judgment of those of us who put this together, and the administrative committee seemed to think it was okay. So
Within our current rules of order, it did specify the second time you speak, it was limited to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But there was never time put on the first speak. So we talked about it and decided we would put the 3 in, and that was our attempt to codify that both times that you would available to speak, that there was a time limit. David Enigal?
Thank you. I want to propose a scenario based on the way these rules are written right now. Underneath Rule 5, we're adding be germane to and fall within, so forth. Under Rule 8, we are being redundant by stating that again, but maybe there's a reason I still can't understand. As I read Rule Order 8, the change, if somebody wants to submit correspondence on an item, it has to be relative to an item on the agenda, as well as fall in the county statutory authority. So my question would be a scenario of, and this has been an ongoing topic for the last 2+ years, a individual wishes to submit correspondence in reference to the mill pond, whatever it might be. In other words, they do not wish to speak in person at the county board meeting. Where does that fall in being able to do that? Because currently we do not have the mill pond on the agenda, but yet I do not want to constrain an individual's right to come to us and speak to all 21, either by correspondence or in person.
I can answer that one. Grant, if you want me to, or you got it?
it's up to you.
Oh, go ahead,
You can go first.
Go ahead, do it.
David, in your scenario to, I've got to look, sorry, on Rule of Order 8, I guess go back first. 5 and 8, I think, complement each other because 5 talks about the items on the agenda and 8 speaks to the correspondence, which we don't have any control over. But we could put in an and or between matters that are on the agenda or within the powers of the county. And something like the mill pond that was pending, certainly in our case in litigation or as a project would be fair game under that scenario. Ken, I don't know if you.
Correct. When we discuss this, that's why, and that's why it is duplicated, because we are trying to make sure people can submit comments yet. So again, the way they can communicate, someone could submit a correspondence and say, I would like to speak about the mill pond, or I would like this to be on the agenda. And that could be submitted because it falls within the responsibilities of the county board. I guess what we're trying to do is, and through our discussions, is not just to allow the correspondence to be a platform for stuff that's not germane to the county board. So if someone wanted to make a statement, I think I said it at admin, for something going on in California, that's not germane to what powers and duties that we have. So that would be the ability, and that could be at the board or the committee level for the chair to not include that as a correspondence in part of the packet. So I think that's what we're trying to address with that item. So they can address items that are on the agenda, and they also can address items that fall within, I guess, the duties and responsibilities and roles of the county board itself.
Okay, so to that effect, I said in for the administrative committee, and that's the way it was described, as the ability to leave it open, but that is not the way it is written.
No, I will take ownership. There's a drafting error, and if
I
we put
figured.
in the, and you found it,
Yes, I did, and you know me.
on that second line of the blueprint, it would simply be item and / or fall within.
Well, and to me, I would rather change the word, and I'll ask Corp Counsel to help me understand how I should make that amendment. Change the word and to or, because the reality is if it's a germane item, an item germane to an agenda item, then up in 5, that's already taken care of.
Okay,
Okay, so by my definition, I would make a motion to change the word and in the second line to or. And then that would answer my concern of allowing an individual to submit a written document, an email, whatever, on any topic that is germane to an agenda item or any topic that is germane to our statutory authority.
and that was the intent, and that amendment would match up with the intent.
So I'd make that motion if that's the way we're supposed to do it.
Dave, what line are you talking about?
Underneath the rules of order 8, it says a regular 5 correspondence, place of the second, in the second blue line after the asterisk, after the word item, change that word to or. That breaks it into 2 functions, either the correspondence that should be germane to agenda item that's coming up, which is a difficult item because we only submit those agendas only go out into the public about 6 days, 5 days ahead of time, or falls within the statutory authority.
Sure.
Which during the discussion at administrative committee was the intent, but that is not the way it's written.
Okay, so you're making an amendment, correct? Did you
That
push the
would
button?
be my motion. Clearly, there's no second yet.
You have to push the button.
You got to push the button.
Oh, I didn't see that change.
There we go. There we go.
And I'll ask Corp Counsel for how we would proceed in this particular item, because I have a second item that I would want to make a motion on.
Well, why don't we take care of each motion? We have a motion, a second, and move on to the second item.
Because of rules of order. Okay, wait. Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Benny?
The question that I have about it is, I guess for us to think about, are we creating an obstacle for the public to participate when we struggle with public participation to begin with, as far as there not being a whole lot of it traditionally? And then also, how is the statutory authority defined? My understanding is by the state, and how is it changed? Usually by requests from the local government or local county board. So if we remove the ability for people to request to even be on, even place comments or have comments be seen, then we're also removing the ability of us, of our body to consider a statutory authority change. So I object to it.
Wait. Oh, put Canada on. Yes, David.
Okay, so to clarify, in my mind, as written, it does restrict to anything, only things that are on the agenda, and I don't like that. If we retain the words as written, it removes more of that, and that irritated me watching the administrative committee with an understanding of the intent, but not as the words are written. So changing the word from and to or opens it up to basically that question you brought up in the past, which is who makes that the decision whether or not it's within our statutory authority. But at least it does give the clear indication that we're not going to limit an effort to communicate. Somebody then does make the decision as to whether or not it gets put in the packet. Otherwise, with the word and, it is only correspondence can be placed on in the packet that's on the agenda.
David Engelbert.
Yes, I just need clarification here. I guess I thought Dave said order 8, but are we on order 5? Which exactly, where is it located? Because item B under order 5 talks about germane and falling within the statutory authority.
Under rule of order 8. If you go down to the 4th line down, to be the second blue highlighted line. The very first word says item, and then the word and. The amendment is changing the word and to or. Okay. What's that? All right. There's nobody else. We will go to the voter board. The amendment has passed by a vote of 18 yea, 2 nay, and 1 absent. Okay. So the word or is inserted. David Enigo.
Item that I wanted to speak on was in reference to corp councils. Oh crap, I lost it. Timely, where was that on? Okay, there it is. Yes, underneath Rule 15 2B, his recommendation of changing if the item is time sensitive. So I'd make a motion to replace timely with the words time sensitive.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on that. Any discussion on that word change? Okay, we will go to the voter board.
We're gonna wait a second before we go to
Uno momento.
to change the word timely to time sensitive, right?
Correct. Yes.
All right.
Okay. That's passed on the vote of 20 yea, 0 nay, and 1 absent. Thank you. David Enigo.
And then just to finish, I'm not enthusiastic about many of these changes, but we've been running underneath an old set of rules for a long time.
Anybody else? Yep. Megan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just note that I too am also unenthusiastic. And in that, feeling, I feel like this is very important and we could probably agree on something that was found to be more enthusiastic by everyone. So I don't know. I mean, I understand what's trying to happen here, I think, I hope. And I understand the need for some of it, but there's something that really just does feel limiting in to the public, for one. And also, I'm still just really struggling with that decision of what is germane to county's statutory authority, responsibilities, and roles. And I guess, I mean, full honesty, the reason I'm having a hard time with that is because an agenda item that we have back on the agenda today, that people have been questioning whether or not that falls under the county's authority, responsibilities, and roles. Constituent, like, we've had a few emails, everybody's gotten them, a few emails questioning whether or not that falls under county authority, which is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. But it opened my eyes also that some folks may not feel that some issues that are very important to a lot of people in our community are appropriate. And I'm a little hesitant to approve this because of that.
David, Enigo?
Remember, there was a third item. It's the exact same issue with the word "and" on Rule of 27. And that is an agenda item and fall within. Same issue. For me, it should be or instead of and. So I'd make a motion to replace and with or.
Push your button there, David.
Trying. And again, I have issues with, we are not a small government entity. We are an arm of the state, unlike cities, villages, and towns. And to appear to be intentionally, as some of our emails and communications that we've received say, less accessible would be wrong. And that is definitely how it was written. That may have been an accident, no questions asked about that. And the conversation you guys had at administrative was not that intent, but that's the way it's written.
Okay, ready to go? Oh, wait, Susan,
Do we want to vote on that other, or
What-
should I?
is your comment about the amendment?
No, I had pressed before. It's about the rules. It's
Okay.
not about this specific amendment, although I agree with this amendment. I
Okay.
seconded it, so. So do you want me to talk or wait until we vote?
We'll do the amendment first. Okay, for the voter board for the amendment, to change the word and to or on Rule 27B, public address in the board, item B. It's the fourth word from the end of the first sentence. And to or. That's passing a vote of 28, one absent. Okay. Susan?
I believe very strongly in the open meetings law and public advocacy. I do. It's been what I've done my whole life. But I'm gonna sound like Scrooge here, or an old school marm, which actually is what I am. To say that we need to, just food for thought. What's the purpose of public comment during county board and during committee meetings, okay? The public, it's important for the public to have access to us, and they do. They can write us an email, they can make a phone call, they can send us a letter, they can talk to us in the grocery store. Public comment by itself is not part of the open meetings law. When bodies put public comment in, it's their choice. Okay, it's not what the law says has to happen. And Grant will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong on this, but I do believe that is the case. So when we come to this board and public comment has, technically, it's my belief that the purpose of it is to influence the decisions we make on the floor at this meeting. Okay, and it's also at committee meetings to influence decisions that are made there. Now, if it's germane, like David's example of the mill pond is a good one. If it's germane to other business, I don't have any problem with anybody speaking about it. But I think we shouldn't assume that we are harming the public and their ability to tell us what they think on anything. If they call me up, I will listen. If they write me a letter, I will read it. And it can be on anything related to this. But we have business to accomplish. We also owe it to the public. I have had people say to me, God, I wanted to watch your meeting, but it went on so long, I couldn't do it. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said for conducting our business, getting our information out, and we don't have to make public comment such a big piece of it that it, I mean, I guess I think we shouldn't assume that if we limit it to a reasonable amount of time, that we are doing a disservice to the public. There's lots of ways. And frankly, as I've told many, many people, if you want to influence a decision, a big decision, you go to the committee and you do it, because by the time it gets here, it's been chewed on for a good long time and it's not likely to change. I can't tell you how many people I've explained that to. So I guess just food for thought. I don't want us to conflate that 30 minutes of public comment or whatever it might be as being so important that we have to let it be the be all and the end all. So, enough said.
Grant?
I can confirm, we're absolutely not required to have a public comment. That was something that the county board decided to do. And public bodies sometimes have public comment, sometimes they don't.
Thank you. David Engelbert?
So I'd like to agree with Susan, I guess, after years of serving on town and here. Public comment is important, but we need to remember that we each represent 1,200 people, whatever it might be. And sometimes they're contacting us individually. They don't have the opportunity to come here and make a presentation, but their voices are just as important to us or to myself as someone coming here and speaking that particular day.
Vinny? Wait.
Thank you. I guess I have had an issue with how things are included in the packet or not. And I understand that it's a matter of timing and how they can possibly be put into a packet. However, the most recent packet had 4 or 5 letters that were against an amendment that I made at the last meeting and didn't have any that were for it. So I feel like it's misrepresentative if it's in a packet. I feel maybe no letters should ever go in a packet, or they all should. I know there's a date cutoff, but again, if the agenda doesn't come out until the date cutoff has already happened, it's impossible to have a fair representation of the public. So that's where I think that there's an issue. Thank you.
Vinny, I guess I could not agree with you more on that. And that's one of the things we're struggling with. And I guess that's my goal, is to get that cleaned up. So again, the issue is, and again, this is food for thought as well. You have individuals that are sending emails to the county board and they're communicating with you. And what we've done in the past is that's a communication to you. That doesn't mean that they wanted it included on the agenda. So we have not included those communications on the agenda unless the email stated that they wanted it included, or a supervisor specifically requested that it be included. Otherwise, we have not done that. And that's what we're going to try and do, I guess, going forward, unless, because again, the stuff that we handed out and the stuff that we're publishing, remember that you're publishing their emails, their addresses, and their phone numbers. Now, I know it's considered a public document when they send it to you, But I guess when they send that to you, is their intention for it to be part of the county board packet and publicized that way? So I guess I give also thought to that when we do this. I know some people like to share, but I don't think they're realizing how they're sharing it and how they're communicating. So from my standpoint, that's why if, going forward, that's what we're trying to do. So if it goes to the full county board, we're not just going to automatically include it in the packet unless it's requested by a county board member to be included in the packet. Because I guess in our mind, when they're doing that, that's not their intent to include it as a communication to the full county. I mean, as a record of this document, it's a communication just talking with the county board. It doesn't mean it has to be a part of the agenda. So that's what we've been trying to do because it has gone back and forth and it's been a thing on either what to include and what not to include. So again, that's what we're going to try and do with the emails coming in. If you get let's say you get an email from a constituent, just to you one-on-one and you want to include that, you can forward it to us and say, I want it included in the packet and we will do so. If it goes to the full county board, if it states in the email that they want it included in the packet, we will do so. Or if a member of the board says we want it included in the packet, we will do so. It's still up to the county board chair to make sure that it's germane when we publish the packet, but that's what we'll try and do. But again, for us, it's been back and forth all over the place. So we're trying to set up, I just want to explain that to everyone. That's what we're going to try and do unless you tell us otherwise of how we're going to handle communications. So, because there is so many of them too, as you can imagine, there's a lot of those that come in at various times and stuff like that. So it's very difficult to work with. So.
Can I just, in clarification in the same topic, so the germane and the relevance to the agenda would be decided by the county board chair before something's included in the packet. So, I mean, it isn't assumed that if you submit that as a county board member, it will go in the packet. It's if it meets this criteria, if this is what we passed today.
Again, ultimately, it's up to the county board chair at the county board level, and then it's up to the committee level chair to determine what's, I guess, within the scope of the agenda to be included or not included. That's the authority of the chair. I guess we'll provide that information as administration. That's not my decision or Jill's, but we'll provide those to the chairs.
Thank you.
I'll make one comment. If I've ever been questioned about including something or not including something, I always try and ask the individual that sent it if they would like it included or not. And I also talked to Grant and I talked to Ken as to whether they believe it should be included if it's germane, or if I question if it's germane or not. So it's not done in a vacuum where I just sit somewhere in a room and decide it is or it's not. I also agree with Ken, try and get as much communication as possible in there within the confines of what we're trying to accomplish. David, and I go.
Yeah, I know I'm exceeding my 2 options, by the way. New topic, new scenario. This has happened in the past, and I believe I know how it would be handled based on how it's written here, but I'm looking for Corp Council's review. In the past, we've had situations where a topic was on the agenda. We've discussed it and it was determined it should go back to the sponsoring committee for review. Looking at Rule 15, it spells out a lot more controls. Does this potentially remove that ability to send it back to the subcommittee in some way, shape, or form? I don't think it does. But I'm looking for Corp Council's response on that.
Certainly, no, it wasn't the intent, and I don't think it can be gleaned from the written language either. The county board just has the inherent authority to send matters back to the sponsoring committees or boards or commissions.
And if I remember correctly, at least 2 different times we did it 2 different ways. One of them was actually as a motion, which is a legal activity. Another one was just the realization that by the time it got to the county board, it's not ready to be discussed. There were other new information that arose. And in both conditions, it's just a board decision to do, correct? As a motion, we can do it no matter what, right?
Right. And the second scenario you discussed was when something happens between when the sponsoring committee met and county board that called into question what the sponsoring committee did. And it's been done sort of as a friendly referral back. The chair of that committee will raise some concerns, and typically the county board says, fine, we'll send that back. And but you're correct. And I don't see anything in the proposed changes that would in any way limit that.
Thank you.
Okay, we will go to the voter board to vote on the amended, thrice amended resolution. Rules of order, I'm sorry, rules of order. That is passed on a majority vote of 15 yea, 5 nay, and 1 absent. Okay. Item 5, presentation of the agenda.
We have to do legislative duties.
Wait, did I miss that? I'm sorry, legislative duties. I was looking at the agenda. We'll need a motion on that one. Thank you. Okay, fine.
Sure, so in your packet, just following that, it's on page, whoops, this was the wrong page.
3.
On page 3 of your packet. If you go into usually in our book, we have all the rules of committees. And what we did is we did an initial draft, but this came through, I guess, as an update to, I guess, draft those more clearly in terms of the duties of the legislative committee and their function. And it's on page 3, and we're looking to have that adopted.
Susan?
Wait, okay, now I'm on. I have to take ownership of this. There have been lots of questions about what are the duties of legislative committee, you know, what's pertinent, what's not pertinent, whatever. And I really believe so strongly in this committee, and I felt like, and I took what was already there and I just tried to flesh it out a little bit more so that it was fairly clear. This is the one committee that's not attached as an oversight to a department, and therefore its agendas are pretty much structured by the business of that department. And in that sense, it's unusual. And so there have always, as long as I've been involved with it as chairman for my first 3 terms, there have always been questions about what is it you do? And, you know, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing or whatever? So I just felt like with the questions swirling around, putting it out there as clearly as I could would help. So that's why I offer this and offered it to the admin committee.
Vinnie?
Thank you. It would be helpful to know what the proposed changes are compared to the original. If we could see that in a change as we do on most of our other changes, it would be helpful. And I have issue with, so many issues today, but with number 3, particularly E, be likely to win county board support. I don't feel that an individual person, committee, or group can determine that or should determine that before something is considered. To me, that is not democracy. Sorry to be, but I don't think that that's appropriate as a defying whether something should come to a county board is if it's likely to have our support. We can't assume to know that without even bringing a topic forward. Thank you.
Vinnie, I would point out that on page 19 of the packet are the current legislative committee duties and responsibilities as they currently exist. Alexis?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify one thing. I don't disagree with the changes and the clarity. I appreciate Supervisor Kohut's time in fleshing this out. I just wanted to make mention that there are, in my estimation, 3 standing committees: legislative, negotiating, risk management and insurance that don't have oversight necessarily. So I just wanted to clarify, I don't think this is the only one.
Kara?
It's me.
Ken.
I did, oh, hit it. I did.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, you're on.
Okay, sorry. I do think that we should have had them on top of each other to see it would be much easier, yeah, instead of going way down to the other page and coming back up. But like so many words, and especially the last thing that we just passed, a lot of these are really subjective, and it benefit the county, be in the county's best interest, be likely to be effective, be practical, be like, they're really, really subjective terms. And I have issue with a lot of them. And I just wanted to bring that forth and say that I don't support this as it's written. Thank you.
Susan?
Yeah, I got them because those were the things that my committee, when I was chair for the 6 years that I was, those were the things we talked about as to whether it was an appropriate thing for us to do. And I would be the first to admit, and Mr. Lino would agree, because I often had many discussions as to whether these were appropriate, that I pushed the envelope lots of times. But I think you have to use judgment on this stuff. This is still a county board committee, and its job is to do the work of the county board and the county's departments. It's not a platform for any issue that comes forward. It truly is not. And so for us, I mean, we would talk about who would vote for this, who wouldn't vote for this on the county board. Because in my mind, if I know it's not got a shot, then what I'm doing is I am putting something forward that is just to be argumentative, to cause, I don't know, to cause a failure. And frankly, you got to pick your shots, because too many failures and people don't listen to you coming in with a new proposal. So I just think that this needs to be used for the good of the county. That doesn't mean, and you know that I fully support this issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I do, because I think that applies to the county. But I think you have to be careful, and I think you have to use judgment. And I was putting down the things we talked about in making our decisions, and I think they make sense. Granted, you don't know for sure, but you talk to people, you discuss it in the committee, and then you start to hear rumblings as to whether, oh God, what are they talking about now, or whatever. You get a sense of it. So I guess that's why, that's why I wrote what I wrote, and it was pretty much what was already there, but fleshed out in more detail as to the process we used. So.
Thank you. David Engelbert?
Yes, I think Susan's proposal here is good. I served as chairman of the legislative committee. Gosh, we made probably close to when it first started. And that's what we do at the time, was review the legislation that was being proposed in Madison, take a look at how it affected the county. If it affected a certain department, refer it there and work with it in that way, because we are an arm of the state, and what they're proposing in Madison often has repercussions here at this level. So I think the role she described is right on. Thank you.
Kara?
Yeah, I would just like to bring it back to say that I think that's what we did on legislative committee already. And I don't feel like, I think it's retaliatory. And I think that it's a little bit, bringing this forward is a little bit of shining a spotlight. We didn't have that much power to begin with, but we, brought forth things and said things. And I think that there's like hearing hearing another supervisor speak really did make me realize that it was because of a certain resolution that all of this is being brought back to the legislative committee. And that doesn't sit right to me. Thank you for your time.
David Enigal?
On page 19, underneath the legislative committee's list, item number 2, draft resolutions deemed to be of merit to the county. First note, it is the county, not necessarily the county board. So keep that in mind. That's one reason I'm not overly enthusiastic with be likely to win with the county board support. It's really, we are looking at legislation that is coming around, documentations, other resolutions, whatever it may be, that matters to the county, not just the board. But my question that would be for Susan is, why was that number 2 that was originally in the list been removed, which is, back to wording again, draft resolutions. I'm looking at the new list. I see no ability to draft resolutions of any type. Am I missing something? Am I misinterpreting something? Because I'll give.
Susan. Hold on, Dave. Can you repeat that last comment, Dave?
Which part? In reference to the ability to draft a resolution?
Did you say anything after that?
What I said after that was one example. It's a very poor example, is the marijuana related one, the medical marijuana one. Really, I don't know what other subcommittee it would have went to.
Okay.
Susan.
Okay, yeah, 2 things. One, I don't have a problem. I mean, I offered this as a suggestion, and I don't have a problem if we change some of this or drop one of the criteria. And maybe saying have a chance to win the county board support is a better way to say it. I don't know. But I don't think it's responsible to bring something forward you know is going to be defeated. I think that's a waste of everybody's time. To respond to David's, and I had this conversation with Bob also, resolution is only one of the things that legislative committee has done. Sometimes we've gone to joint finance and testified. Sometimes we've called representatives. Sometimes we've written letters. So number 3 is consider and plan to implement advocacy strategies for submittal to the approval of the county board. That could be any of those, and it also could be resolution. I just didn't want to limit it to only resolutions, because frankly, I think lots of times they're the least effective. So that's my opinion on that, about resolutions. Sometimes they work, and sometimes if we all called somebody, I think we'd get further.
So your choice of word changing, in your mind, your intent was number 3 would consider that as an option. It's not written in there, but it's just part of that. Okay.
And anything else that might work.
Anybody else? Vinny?
Thank you. It's my day to speak. I appreciate the effort and the thought that went into this. I guess I need clarification for if something's listed as a duty, who would determine you did not do your duty? So if we have these so specifically laid out, in what scenario would we say this was not relevant, this was not timely, it was not likely to pass by a county board support, so it should not have been taken up by the legislative committee? I feel like when we specifically lay out all of these criteria, we have to be able to make use of them. And I don't know how we would. Who would be the ultimate judge of all of these criteria and the appropriateness of a committee?
Again, just on that one, every committee has their rules actually set up or some guidelines of what they're supposed to follow. So I mean, that question you're asking could be asked of every single one of those committees. Again, the whole idea of the rules and how we have those defined is we're trying to at least give some guidance to how the committee functions. Ultimately, if something goes on the agenda or something like that, I mean, as the administrator, I'm monitoring most of the agenda. So if a committee is not conducting the business, then I'll bring that back through David and the county board, and the county board can then take action of what to do with that committee or how to make changes or so forth. I mean, that's the way we function. But every committee has the rules there. So the fact that we're just defining some of that here, I understand. I mean, we're just trying to define at least some of the ways that, I guess, deal with items and issues. So that's the intent.
Yes, I completely understand and respect that. I just not sure why the legislative committee would be selected to have the change of being relevant, timely, necessary, available to be, able to be influenced, and all the way through A through E in section 3. That seems like that would be the work of any committee and any county board to a sense, besides E, as I particularly said, because I don't think we can prejudge, even if we talk to people, which how many people, we're not supposed to be talking to lots of people and to not have a walking quorum. So I really feel that if this is in the legislative committee line of work, these seem very subjective and about quality of work, not about what your general rules are or your mission of your committee is. Thank you.
Susan?
I lost what I was first thinking as a response to Vinnie's beginning. I guess the first thing I should say is legislative committee rules have been changed. They were changed during those 6 years when I was chair of it, as have duties of others. This one is more subjective. There isn't any question about it. It just is. It was then, and I have no doubt it will continue to be going into the future. And I wish I could remember the other question that she asked. But again, this was to describe a process, because there's nobody that comes to you and says, other than that list of resolutions you get from other counties or WCA or NACO, nobody else says, well, we need you to approve this hire or this, dump truck or this whatever. There isn't business on the table. So every single thing that comes to you has to have the judgment of the committee as to whether it's appropriate to take the time to do it. And frankly, you can't do them all. One of the things we talked about, and I don't even know if it's on here, but is you got to pick your shots. If you are constantly sending resolutions, people are going to write them off and not pay attention. Some counties do that, but we just felt like we need to focus on things that we have a chance of making a difference on. Levy limits is a perfectly good example of one that we all hate. But the fact of the matter is, if there is no chance in that particular climate of changing anything, then it's spinning wheels. You have to make choices and work on things you think you can affect at the time you think you can affect them. That's life.
Megan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't disagree with anything that Supervisor Kohut is saying, and I appreciate the work that went into this. I feel to some extent what's happening is that, and I can only speak for myself, and I will do so very plainly, that there's a certain level of distrust because of timing on this and the other. And so if you could explain to me and the rest of us how this came to be timing wise right now, and how this came back up for clarification, discussion, and changes at this time. If I can have a timeline of some sort, that would be really helpful for me.
Susan?
From my timeline, it was simply a matter that I'm sensitive to what goes on with legislative committee, and I was when I was chair. I would hear the rumblings, and I would know that we served at the pleasure of the county board. I'm going to put it plainly. This is not a required committee. And if the county board wanted to cancel it, they could. Just like they can add more members to another committee or create another committee, whatever. That's the reality of it. And so I heard rumblings, I heard people complaining, and I thought, I don't want to see this committee go away. I think it has a real value and I believe in it. And so I said to Ken and to David, I would like to try to write this in a way that will be more understandable for the other members. So that's the timeline. And I knew that if we make changes, we make them at this point at the April meeting, or we can make them again, I believe, in November at that meeting. It was the time to bring it forward. So, I mean, I may not be the only person who wanted this to be done, but I volunteered to do this because of my concerns.
Jen, is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So if I'm hearing correctly, there were rumblings because there was displeasure of what came through legislative committee. And this is in response to that in order to protect its preservation, because some members of this board did not care for what came through legislative. Or maybe don't care for the stance of some of the folks that are sitting on legislative. Am I hearing that correctly?
I guess if I could, if just from my perspective, I would not read it that way. I know what you're, I guess what you're saying in terms of the timing.
I'm asking a question.
No, and I'd say no, that it's not. I think that the issue has been, even before we did this the previous year before, is what is the overall goal for legislative committee? And it's gone back and forth. And I actually had a discussion with Susan on this before when she was even the chair. So if you think about what's happening, is if we have, let's say, a resolution or something that's going on, a lot of times those resolutions are coming directly to the home committees. Or for example, they're coming into legislative and they get sent to the home committees. There's always been a debate on what the role of the legislative committee is with resolutions or taking actions and discussions and so forth, and what's added on it. And it always is a point of contention in terms of what's happening with the legislative committee, who has the role, who has the authority. So it's been discussed multiple times now, and Susan even knows this before, when we had those discussions of, do we actually need legislatives? In other words, anything that comes in, should it get funneled directly to the home committee, because that's where it should go in terms of a reaction for in the first place. Then it's up to the home committee just to funnel it back up. That's so then that's been part of the debate. Then the question is well, when does legislative committee then write a resolution? Let's say an item for human services. Do they have the right to bring that forward without having to go to human service? So, and then there's the timing issue. So it's always been one of those things. What's the role of legislative? There's always been a discussion about, okay, well, then what happens on a bill that's going forward? Well, the home committee could also call their legislators and take action on it too. So again, it's always gone back and forth. And I noticed through the discussions, we try to maintain the committee and we keep on trying to refine the rules in terms of how we want them to interact. Because it's always what comes in, how does it get funneled, and how does it get funneled back up? This has always been a point of contention. So that's, for my mind, where this is stemming from.
Thank you.
David Enigo?
First off, two items. First off, I was on, when I first got on the board, I was appointed to the legislative committee along with Susie. Sat on there, I think, for one more term than she did. And it was a committee that did not meet hardly at all, if at all, that I'm aware of. And has always been a moving target. It is an entity that's just, it's been trying to find a good niche and where it belongs. Don't necessarily agree with the timing at this moment for the wording. My question is an explanation of the intent in subsection 1F, able to be influenced. What was that meant to mean?
Oops, I'm sorry, Susan.
Susan?
Oh, okay, to me it was, and I refer to the levy limit thing. If it's something that's dead in the water at that particular time, and you judge that by hearing what the leadership of the legislature or the current governor or the whatever it is, if it's dead in the water, then it's not, then you're going to spin your wheels. Okay. And part of this is monitoring what actually is going on so that if there's movement in some case, then is a time to move in to take action. So it's like with any governmental body, if it is not on their radar and they have no intention of putting it on their radar for that particular session, then taking the staff time and the county board, dollars to meet and whatever seems to me a waste of time. So that's the able to be influenced. Is this a time when we can make a difference on this particular issue?
So everybody that knows me knows that I'm not necessarily the cleanest speaker in the world, but I do pick out these words. I read that word as implying that the committee can be influenced. What you really mean is able to be influencing. I get,
Morgan?
Thank you. Question for Supervisor Coho. I again appreciate you doing this. I like seeing all of these things laid out, especially being a newer member of this board. I'm wondering if you can, I'm kind of backtracking to Supervisor Lundell's question, but you mentioned rumblings, you mentioned complaints. It would help me to understand the nature of those. Are those, issues with the issues themselves? Are they issues with the members on that committee? Causing some reorganization. I guess I would like a better handle on what those rumblings are. Thank you.
I think they're on whatever issues. I mean, I would hear them when I was chair, when we would be taking up all kinds of issues that weren't necessarily pertaining to county board functions. And I do believe that there are some issues that rise to a level where, while they don't come from human services or the highway or whatever, whether they rise to being appropriate. And so there was always that question, are they doing too much of non-county board business? Are they listening to too many other issues that are out there? And I think we have to be careful because, again, our function is really not to be a platform for all of society's problems. It just isn't, unless that problem affects the workings of the county. And I mean that I totally get that this is a totally a judgment call. But it's part of that discussion that you have with your committee as to, are we dealing with county business, whether the funding for child support's been cut, or whether they're going to cut the money for soil and water so that we have to lay a worker off, whatever. That's direct, important business that we do as county board supervisors, as supervisors of this organization. And yes, we can spend some time if there are important community issues, but if we're spending all our time doing that, then we're not doing the business of the county's functioning, of the organization. I don't know if I'm making sense, but.
Okay, nobody else. We will go to the voter board. That's passed by a vote of 15 yea, 5 nay, and 1 absent. Thank you. Okay. Agenda order.
There's no action really to be taken on that unless someone wants to change, but again, we just put that on there because that was a question in terms of that, in terms of our agenda, so we just included that again in terms of the packet as a reminder that we do have a standard format that we use for agenda. We did not have any changes that need to be adopted.
Okay. David Engel.
I thought we changed the rules, page 9, section 38. The county shall be provided notice of any grants, gifts, and so forth in excess of 5,000 prior to acceptance. What does that mean? I thought over 5,000, the county board had to approve it. I know we went through that change last year, and I don't remember the breaking points.
The intent was for the county board to be provided notice and approve in advance, and we can make a friendly amendment to that.
But I understand the notice part, or I thought the county board is the one that had to approve it.
They do.
So who, prior to acceptance, who's the one doing the acceptance?
The county board, so what could be revised there, it can read that particular sentence is county board shall be provided notice of and must approve any donation, gift, or grant equal to or in excess of $5,000 prior to acceptance.
Okay, so to be non-good county board member, can I make a motion indicating that it be revised as corp council recommended?
So didn't we, I agree with what David's saying. Didn't we, that's what we approved last time.
I thought we did and somehow,
So don't we just need to make the language change
yes,
and bring it back and let us know that you changed the language?
yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so in other words, we don't need a motion activity on that, just a correction.
Correct.
So that's going to get corrected. Is that the intent?
Yes, it was changed. It should have been corrected. It's not, so we'll add the words and approve.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
then bring it back and let us see it, right?
Yes, we can certainly do that.
Okay. Presentation of the agenda. Okay, approved. Oh. By voice vote to approve the agenda, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Thank you. Okay. We'll start with correspondence. The unassigned fund balances in there. Any questions on that? Door County Coastal Byway letter. Mr. Pawlowski. Email, Governor Eber's office email, Don Fricks. And Mr. Stolenworks email. Any questions on those? Okay. Yeah. Before we go to public comment, we will take a 10-minute break. I'll come back at 10:30.